In the late 1990s, Hollywood watched a prodigy implode in real time. Robert Downey Jr., the shape-shifting chameleon from Chaplin, Oscar-nominated at 27, and the scene stealer of Natural Born. Killers kept vanishing from sets and surfacing in police blotters. There were sirens and headlines. Heroin, cocaine, probation violations, a judge's gavel sending him to state prison. A fire-by-fax dismissal from Ally McBeal even after he'd just won a Golden Globe. He seemed fated to become another cautionary tale, a brilliant talent swallowed by addiction in an industry that had stopped taking his calls. Then, a plot twist no one believed the studio would risk. In 2008, Marvel bet its entire future on the very actor Hollywood had written off. Iron Man hit like a defibrillator, and Downey's career roared back to life, launching the MCU and recasting him from liability to linchpin, from tabloid tragedy to North Star of a billion-dollar universe. How did a man who couldn't stay out of jail become the most bankable anchor in modern film history? And what exactly did it cost to climb back from the edge without losing the soul that made the talent possible? Robert John Downey Jr. was born on April 4th, 1965, in Manhattan, New York, into a family already immersed in the world of art and counterculture. His father, Robert Downey Sr., was an underground filmmaker known for his avant-garde, often provocative movies. His mother, Elsie Ann Ford, was an actress who frequently appeared in her husband's projects. From the very beginning, performance and experimentation surrounded young Robert. But his childhood was far from ordinary. Growing up in Greenwich Village, he was exposed to a bohemian lifestyle where art, eccentricity, and excess blended freely. Downey Sr. struggled with substance abuse, and tragically, he introduced his son to drugs at a shockingly young age. Robert later recalled smoking marijuana with his father, at just 6 years old, describing it as a twisted way of bonding. That early exposure planted the seeds of addiction that would haunt him for decades. Despite the turbulence at home, Downey Jr. displayed an extraordinary natural talent for mimicry and performance. He attended the Stage Door Manor Performing Arts Training Center and performed in school plays, showing early flashes of the charisma and intensity that would define his career. His parents' marriage collapsed when he was a teenager, and Robert moved between New York and California, struggling with instability. He briefly attended high school in Santa Monica, but dropped out at 16 to pursue acting full-time. By then, the pull of drugs was already strong, but so was his hunger for the stage and screen. The combination of parental influence, artistic exposure, and early trauma shaped Downey Jr.'s complex identity, a magnetic talent destined for greatness, but carrying demons too heavy for a child to bear. His childhood set the stage for both his meteoric rise and his near-fatal fall. Robert Downey Jr.'s education was unconventional, shaped less by classrooms and more by the chaotic rhythm of his upbringing. After dropping out of Santa Monica High School at 16, he committed fully to acting. The decision wasn't reckless. It was inevitable. He had already absorbed performance through osmosis, growing up on his father's film sets and surrounded by actors, writers, and musicians. His earliest roles came directly from his father, Robert Downey Sr., in films like Pound, 1970, a surreal comedy where 5-year-old Robert played a puppy, and Greaser's Palace, 1972. He was introduced to filmmaking almost as soon as he could walk. These early experiences gave him an ease in front of the camera, but they also blurred the line between childhood and performance. By the early 1980s, Downey Jr. was hustling through small roles in theater and television. His real break came in 1985 when he joined the cast of Saturday Night Live. Though his tenure was short and not particularly successful, It gave him exposure and connections in the industry. His youthful energy, sharp wit, and chameleon-like ability to inhabit characters quickly caught directors' eyes. Downey began landing roles in the Brat Pack era of teen films, though he never quite fit the mold of clean-cut heartthrob. He appeared in Weird Science, 1985, and Back to School, 1986, carving a niche as the quirky, unpredictable supporting player. Hollywood saw him as different, less polished, more dangerous, but undeniably magnetic. His breakthrough into serious acting came with films like Less Than Zero, 1987, where he played Julian, a rich kid spiraling into cocaine addiction. The role was disturbingly close to his real life and showcased his ability to portray fragility and recklessness with haunting authenticity. Critics hailed him as one of the most gifted actors of his generation. By the end of the 1980s, Downey Jr. had established himself as a rising star. Versatile, daring, and unafraid to take risks. Yet even then, his personal battles with drugs were beginning to parallel his on-screen characters, a warning sign that Hollywood largely ignored in favor of his undeniable brilliance. By the early 1990s, Robert Downey Jr. had evolved from quirky supporting actor to one of Hollywood's most promising leading men. His defining breakthrough came with Richard Attenborough's Chaplin. 1992. Cast as the legendary Charlie Chaplin, Downey immersed himself completely, studying Chaplin's physicality, cadence, and even learning to play the violin and tennis left-handed. The transformation was astonishing. His performance earned him widespread acclaim and an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor at just 27 years old. Overnight, Robert wasn't just a talented actor, he was a serious contender for greatness. Following Chaplin, Downey entered a prolific phase, balancing prestige projects with mainstream fare. He starred in Heart and Souls, 1993, Only You, 1994, and delivered a chilling turn in Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers, 1994. His ability to oscillate between comedy, romance, and darkness made him one of the most versatile actors of his generation. He wasn't pigeonholed. He was unpredictable, and audiences loved it. He continued to impress critics with Restoration, 1995, and Richard III, 1995, where he held his own among Shakespearean heavyweights. In One Night Stand, 1997, and The Gingerbread Man, 1998, he proved his staying power as a dramatic actor. Yet even as his resume expanded, his personal struggles with substance abuse loomed ominously, mirroring his performance as Julian in Less Than 0 years earlier. Despite these struggles, Downey remained in high demand. Directors admired his naturalism, his wit, and the emotional honesty he brought to each role. In 2000, he joined the cast of Ally McBeal, injecting fresh energy into the legal dramedy. His portrayal of Larry Paul earned him a Golden Globe Award and reintroduced him to mainstream audiences. For a brief moment, it seemed Robert had conquered both his demons and the industry. But the success masked deeper turmoil. Even during his brightest professional years, arrests and relapses punctuated his career. Still, what kept Hollywood invested was his undeniable genius. Downey had the rare ability to elevate any material to make even flawed films worth watching. He was magnetic, a once-in-a-generation talent. By the late 1990s, Robert Downey Jr. was perched precariously between brilliance and chaos. His artistic triumphs positioned him among Hollywood's elite, but his private addictions were spiraling out of control. The next chapter of his life would prove catastrophic, marked not by accolades, but by mugshots and courtrooms. Yet this tension between extraordinary success and looming downfall set the stage for one of the most dramatic collapses and eventual comebacks in modern Hollywood history. Robert Downey Jr.'s love life mirrored the turbulence of his career, passionate, chaotic, and at times destructive. His relationships often unfolded under the glare of tabloids, becoming yet another stage on which his battles with addiction and redemption played out. In 1992, at the height of his early fame after Chaplin, Robert married Deborah Faulconer, a model and singer-songwriter. Their whirlwind romance reflected his impulsive nature. The two had known each other for just 42 days before tying the knot. For a time, their relationship seemed to anchor him, and in 1993 they welcomed a son, Indio Faulconer Downey. But as the 1990s progressed, Robert's escalating drug use destabilized everything. Arrests, rehab stints, and erratic behavior made family life increasingly untenable. Faulconer, though initially supportive, found herself unable to protect their marriage from the chaos. By 2001, after years of turmoil and public scandals, the couple divorced. Their son Indio later faced his own struggles with substance abuse, an echo of his father's path, though Robert would later help him seek treatment. After the divorce, Robert's personal life descended. Further, his romances were fleeting, overshadowed by his addiction and constant run-ins with the law. For many, it seemed unlikely he would ever find stability, either in love or in life. That changed in 2003, when fate intervened on the set of Gothica. There, Robert met Susan Levin, a film producer working on the project. At first, Susan was cautious, aware of Robert's reputation, and wary of his instability. But Robert was immediately smitten. Against expectations, he pursued her with persistence and sincerity, determined to prove he could be a better man. Their relationship became the turning point of his life. Susan made it clear she would not tolerate his addictions, drawing a line that Robert had never encountered before. For the first time, love became a reason, strong enough to confront his demons. With her support and his own determination, he began the grueling process of recovery. In 2005, Robert and Susan married, marking the start of a new chapter. Together, they would go on to have 2 children, Exton, born 2012, and Avery, born 2014. Unlike his whirlwind first marriage, Robert's partnership with Susan was built on discipline, trust, and resilience. She became his anchor, his fiercest advocate, and his partner in rebuilding both his personal life and his career. Looking back, Robert often credits Susan with saving him. In interviews, he describes their marriage not as a fairy tale, but as a hard-earned victory, a daily choice to stay grounded, sober, and committed. Where once his relationships were defined by chaos, his marriage to Susan Levin became a foundation for the most successful phase of his life. Robert Downey Jr.'s love story is thus inseparable from his redemption. From impulsive passion to destructive collapse to mature partnership, his journey through love and marriage reflects the same arc as his career: chaos, consequence, and, ultimately, renewal. By the mid-1990s, Robert Downey Jr. was no longer just the wunderkind of Chaplin or the versatile darling of critics. He was becoming a cautionary tale in the making. What had begun as youthful experimentation with drugs spiraled into full-blown addiction to heroin, cocaine, and alcohol. The boy who had been introduced to substances by his father at age 6 now found himself utterly consumed by them. In 1996, the first in a long string of public scandals erupted. Police stopped Downey for speeding and discovered heroin, cocaine, and an unloaded .357 Magnum in his car. The arrest sent shockwaves through Hollywood, but many chalked it up to a troubled genius having a bad night. That illusion crumbled quickly. Over the next few years, Downey was arrested repeatedly for drug possession, trespassing, and probation violations. In one infamous incident, he broke into a neighbor's home under the influence and fell asleep in a child's bed. Each arrest brought him more notoriety and fewer opportunities. Judges cycled him through rehab programs, but relapses were constant. His inability to stay sober became as much a part of his public identity as his acting talent. By 1999, the legal system had run out of patience. A California judge sentenced him to 3 years in state prison for repeatedly violating probation. Though he served only about a year due to time served and parole, the incarceration marked a grim low point. Once hailed as one of the most gifted actors of his generation, Downey was now a tabloid staple, his mugshots replacing movie posters. His professional life disintegrated in tandem. In 2000, he was cast on Ally McBeal, bringing fresh energy to the hit series. His performance was lauded, earning him a Golden Globe Award. Yet just as his career seemed salvageable, another relapse derailed him. In 2001, he was arrested again and fired from the show, famously dismissed via fax. The humiliation was complete. An actor who had stood on the Oscar stage less than a decade earlier was now Hollywood's most infamous liability. Throughout the early 2000s, Downey's addiction battles made him virtually unemployable. Studios couldn't insure him, directors wouldn't take the risk, and public opinion had shifted from sympathy to scorn. He spent stretches in court-mandated rehab, trying and failing to regain control. Friends and colleagues described him as brilliant but unreliable, a man at war with himself. The press reveled in his downfall. His arrests and relapses were front-page news turned into late-night comedy monologues and cautionary tales about wasted potential. To many, Downey's career was over. He was lumped in with the tragic archetype of stars undone by their demons, talented but doomed. Yet behind the mugshots and headlines, Downey was not entirely defeated. Even in his darkest moments, he maintained a belief in his own talent and a faint hope of redemption. In interviews years later, he admitted that prison had forced him to confront the brutal reality of his addiction. He described the experience as both terrifying and clarifying. Stripped of fame, wealth, and freedom, he saw what was truly at stake. Still, in the early 2000s, Hollywood had moved on. New stars filled the roles once earmarked for him. The young man who had seemed destined to define a generation was instead a ghost, haunting the industry from the sidelines. Robert Downey Jr.'s downfall was not a single scandal, but a relentless cycle of relapse, arrest, and public humiliation. It was a slow-motion implosion played out on the world stage. By 2003, he was a man written off by nearly everyone, too unreliable for work, too addicted for redemption, too far gone to matter. What no one could have predicted was that this apparent ending would instead become the prologue to one of the greatest comeback stories in Hollywood history. By the early 2000s, Robert Downey Jr. was seen as damaged goods. The consequences of his arrests, prison time, and repeated relapses had left him nearly unemployable. Casting him meant risking delays, insurance nightmares, and the possibility that he wouldn't finish the job. Hollywood had effectively closed its doors. Financially, the fallout was severe. Legal fees, rehab costs, and lost salaries drained his fortune. Personally, he was alienated from many colleagues, and his relationship with his son Indio was strained. Even as he struggled to stay sober, the stigma of being a junkie actor followed him everywhere. For many, his career seemed permanently over. But Downey was determined not to be defined by his lowest moments. After meeting Susan Levin on the set of Gothica 2003, he found an anchor. Susan's insistence that she would only be with him if he committed fully to sobriety gave him the motivation he had long lacked. Downey embraced recovery with newfound discipline, using therapy, martial arts, and meditation to rebuild both his body and his mind. Professionally, his comeback began in modest roles. Director Shane Black cast him in Kiss Kiss. Bang Bang 2005, a sharp neo-noir comedy where Downey's wit and charisma shone. The film wasn't a box office hit, but it became a cult favorite and reminded Hollywood insiders of his brilliance. Similarly, in Good Night and Good Luck 2005 and Zodiac 2007, he delivered strong supporting performances that earned him critical respect. These projects showed that, under the right conditions, Downey could still be counted on. Yet trust was slow to rebuild. Studios remained wary, and insurers demanded hefty bonds to cover him. Many executives thought his career would plateau at small, quirky roles rather than blockbuster stardom. That perception would change dramatically in 2008. When Marvel Studios began casting for Iron Man, the stakes were enormous. The film was meant to launch an interconnected cinematic universe, but the character was not widely known outside comic fandom. Director Jon Favreau pushed for Downey, believing his own history of self-destruction and redemption mirrored Tony Stark's. Executives hesitated, casting a man fresh out of scandal as the face of a billion-dollar gamble seemed insane. But Favreau insisted, and Downey, now sober and focused, seized the opportunity. The gamble would alter Hollywood forever. Robert Downey Jr.'s attempted comeback was not sudden, but the result of years of persistence, discipline, and the support of those who believed in him when few others would. By the time Iron Man premiered in 2008, Downey had rebuilt enough credibility to prove he was not only employable but capable of carrying an entire franchise. His story was no longer just one of scandal and downfall. It was becoming the blueprint for Hollywood redemption. The release of Iron Man in 2008 was not just a box office success. It was a cultural earthquake. Robert Downey Jr., once dismissed as a Hollywood cautionary tale, became the cornerstone of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU. His portrayal of Tony Stark, witty, flawed, arrogant yet deeply human, resonated with audiences worldwide. Downey wasn't just playing Iron Man, he embodied him. The parallels between Stark's reckless genius, turned responsible hero, and Downey's own fall and rise gave the performance a raw authenticity no other actor could replicate. For over a decade, Downey anchored the MCU, appearing in Avengers films, sequels, and crossovers that grossed billions. By the time Avengers Endgame 2019 closed his chapter, his arc was hailed as one of the most emotionally impactful in cinema history. The man who had once been uninsurable was now the highest-paid actor in Hollywood. Outside the MCU, Downey leveraged his comeback into diverse projects, producing films, investing in environmental initiatives, and supporting prison reform and recovery programs. His marriage to Susan Levin remained his bedrock, and together they built a stable family life that contrasted sharply with the chaos of his past. Yet questions linger about his legacy. For some, Downey will always be synonymous with Iron Man, his career defined by a single role. For others, he is proof that redemption is possible even in an industry infamous for discarding the fallen. His life story embodies both Hollywood's brutality and its rare capacity for forgiveness. Today, Robert Downey Jr. stands as more than an actor. He is a symbol of resilience. From prodigy to prisoner to superhero, his journey defies every expectation. The open question remains, can he reinvent himself again, beyond a shadow of Tony Stark? Or is being Iron Man, both on screen and in spirit, the role he was always meant to play? Either way, his story has become one of the most legendary comebacks in Hollywood history, one that proves even the most broken narratives can be rewritten.